The Democratic Party has a problem. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, known for making anti-Semitic comments, now downplaying the 9/11 terror attacks.
CARE was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties.
The New York Post blasting Omar. Here's Thursday's front cover. But some of her radical cohorts are defending her. Listen to this.
All right, when you really sit with it, this starts with that line from Ilhan Omar that still hits hard, not as a one-off mistake, but something suggesting a bigger pattern. Then it quickly widens, setting up a direct clash with Dan Crenshaw and LOC, while pulling in a heavier investigation tied to Omar's circle. And when you step back, it's all framed through one lens: accountability. Who's standing up for the country and who isn't.
This is just pure racist act by many of those, hateful acts by those, because she does speak truth.
We are getting to the level where this is an incitement of violence against progressive women of color.
Republican Congressman and retired Navy SEAL Dan Crenshaw also sounding off against Omar, tweeting this. First member of Congress to ever describe terrorists who killed thousands of Americans on 9/11 as some people who did something, quote unquote. Unbelievable. AOC coming to Omar's defense with this ridiculous response. You refuse to co-sponsor the 9/11 Victims' Compensation Fund, yet have the audacity to drum a resentment towards Ilhan with completely out-of-context quotes. In 2018, right-wing extremists were behind almost all of U.S. domestic terror killings. Why don't you go do something about that? Congressman Dan Crenshaw joins me now. I mean, I'm almost at a loss for words, Congressman, and we can just take this one at a time. How would you like to respond to AOC saying that you need to do something about it? I mean, you did lose your eye protecting her, fighting overseas for our country.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot to unpack there, right? And it's like you said, it's almost not worth responding to. Okay, but let's unpack this. Okay, so she thinks that co-sponsoring a bill, by the way, that isn't out of committee yet, means that's how you're defending 9/11 victims. Last I checked, I thought I did defend 9/11 victims. I went overseas and tried to make sure that this attack never happened again, and made sure to take the fight to the enemy that committed it. It's not just her either. It's also her counterpart in New York, Max Rose. I mean, the fact that they would double down on this and try to provide cover for Ilhan Omar when all you have to do really is say, hey, you know, she misspoke, or maybe she didn't mean it that way. Why don't you say that?
Yeah, all she has to say is, I was a little too flip. Perhaps my language was a little too imprecise. I know that 3,000 people died on that horrible day, and those some people were radical al-Qaeda terrorists who we've been trying to bring to justice. But she doesn't do that. She actually doubled down with this tweet. Look at what Omar tweeted about this. This is from, I guess, the other day. The people and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon. That's President George W. Bush. Was Bush downplaying the terrorist attacks? What if he was a Muslim? I mean, George W. Bush went to ground zero when there was still smoke up there, and we didn't even know it was al-Qaeda exactly. And he says, you know, they brought these buildings down, and he went into Afghanistan and he did something about it. What is she doing?
I don't know. I think she needs to hire a different comms director. I don't even know what she's getting at with that particular tweet. Again, there's too much material here. It comes at us every single day, Jesse. And I think she needs to stop.
I don't like the fact that they try to use her gender or her Muslim faith or her race as a shield. Like, she says whatever she wants. It's crazy and completely irresponsible for a sitting member of Congress. And then the minute you criticize her, she says, oh, you're attacking me because I'm a Muslim, or I'm a woman, or I'm black.
Right. And this is the worst kind of argumentation. So what they're doing is they're trying to silence any kind of arguments against them. Why? Because they don't actually have an argument to make. So what they do is they'll use identity to try and silence anyone else from saying anything. You're not allowed to say that because of who I am.
Right.
Well, sorry, no, that's not how things work in a democracy, and especially amongst members of Congress. We are supposed to debate ideas. If you say something, we should call it out. I mean, that is the point of this. That's why we were elected. So to say that you're not allowed to talk about something because of identities is nonsense. And it's also sort of bigoted in itself, because you're assuming that everybody of a certain skin color or gender should think a certain way. And that is really wrong. It's the content of your character that matters. It's the ideas that you have. And that's what we should actually be debating here.
Yeah, because if that congressman or woman said the exact same thing she said, and it was a straight white male, we would still be saying, do not say that. What are you talking about? It has nothing to do with what she looks like. It's what comes out of her mouth. You know, she's, 3 months in, she's already caused a huge headache for Nancy Pelosi, so that's fun to watch. But besides that, I mean, I don't see...
Pelosi, by the way, also isn't a co-sponsor on that bill that AOC mentioned.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
all right, Congressman...
I mean, it's nonsense, of course.
Congressman, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for serving our country. You did a lot more than what AOC did, so let's remind everybody about that. Have a great rest of the weekend.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about this massive fraud out in Minnesota in the state welfare program. Has been under federal investigation since all the way back in 2022. The president told you, though, this week to look into Somalis who, quote, ripped off that state for billions of dollars. He said they contribute nothing. What exactly are you investigating?
Well, Margaret, to be clear, the initial fraud that was discovered by the IRS, for which I'm the acting commissioner, is discovered by IRS Criminal Investigations Unit. This was not an endogenous thing that the state of Minnesota decided we had to go in and clean up the mess for them, and this is part of the continued cleanup. A lot of money has been transferred from the individuals who committed this fraud, including those who donated to the governor, donated to Representative Omar, donated to A.G. Ellison, but they've been transferred to something called MBSs. And those are
mortgage-backed security. What do you mean?
Sorry.
Transferred to what?
These are money the Bureau services, and they are wire transfer organizations that are outside the regulated banking system, and that money has gone overseas. And we are tracking that both to the Middle East and to Somalia to see what the uses of that have been.
Okay, but you have no evidence of that money being used to fuel terrorism at this point, which is what some conservative writers are alleging.
That's why it's an investigation. We started it last week. We'll see where it goes. But I can tell you that, it's terrible. Representative Omar tried to downplay it, said, it was very, it was very tough to know how this money should be used. Yeah. She was gaslighting the American people.
Well, we'll talk to her.
Yeah, but when you come to this country, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on. You got to learn to stop at stop signs, and you got to learn not to defraud the American people.
Well,
all right. When you really sit with this part, you can feel the tone shift. It's not just reaction anymore. It's frustration that's been building for a while. So the host starts by almost pausing and going, okay, let's actually unpack this, because there's a lot stacked on top of each other. And the first thing he locks onto is Crenshaw. Not just defending him, but pointing out how differently he handles pressure. Like a OC thought she had him cornered with that bill argument, but instead of getting emotional, he just slows it down and reframes the whole thing. And that's where the bigger point comes in. This idea that identity is being used as a shield. Now, that argument isn't new. We've heard versions of it before any time political debates get heated. But fast forward to now, and it feels like people are less patient with it. They don't just want to hear why something was said. They want accountability for what was said. And it circles back to that 9/11's comment again, and you can tell this is where the emotion really sits. It's not being treated as clumsy wording, but as something that downplays a moment people still see as sacred. And when that gets compared to how leaders responded in real time back then, yeah, that's where the disconnect hits harder. But then the conversation takes a darker turn. It's no longer just about rhetoric. Now it's about this fraud investigation. And the way it's framed, it's not small scale or abstract. It's being presented as something massive, something that directly affects ordinary people. And here's the underlying feeling tying it all together. A sense that there are two different standards. That if the roles were reversed, the reaction would be way harsher. Whether that's true or not, that perception alone is what's driving the frustration here. By the end, it's less about one politician and more about trust. Who's actually protecting the system and who's bending it? That's the question being pushed. And you can tell this isn't being asked casually. It's meant to spark a real argument.